Alright, welcome to a new topic of infectious diseases. This is your second last topic, right, for your H2 syllabus. Okay, so it's quite a large topic. I have about at least six SLS sessions on this, and I'll spend the first 4 sessions on part 1, the immune system. Okay, so let's start off with the overview of the immune system, right? The immune system is made up of many immune cells and their cellular processes, their functions, right? Together, they form the defense of the body against pathogens, so they will be able to detect pathogens as well as destroy and remove them. And in doing so, they should not, as far as possible, they should not cause damages, or they should not kill our own body's healthy cells. All right, so the immune cells should be able to distinguish between pathogens from our own body's immune cells. This is described as self versus non-self. Self referring to our own healthy cells, and non-self would be the pathogens or any other things that does not belong to the body. All right. So for pathogens, there are many different kinds of pathogens, right? We'll be focused more on bacteria and viruses, since these are 2 things that we have learned also in our syllabus. But there are others, right? We have the protozoan. Example would be the Plasmodium protozoan that causes malaria. We have kind of looked at it or touched on it, right, when we talked about the mosquito-borne diseases, right? And also we have fungi that can cause diseases in us, as well as some kind of proteins or prion or toxins, right? All these non-cellular things, right, that can cause diseases. So collectively, these are called pathogens or infectious agents, which would be detected and removed by the immune system. So just now we mentioned the immune cells, which should have the ability to distinguish between self and non-self, right? So such distinguishing or recognition, right, of our own body cells versus pathogens would be due to the presence of different receptors on the immune cells. Right, so there will be receptors that recognize structures on the pathogens, and also there will be receptors that recognize proteins or cell surface proteins on our own body's healthy cells. Right, so with that, right, then the immune cells will be able to recognize and distinguish between the 2, and therefore kill the pathogens, but not our own healthy cells. Okay, so you have learned this under cell signaling, right? So it's kind of the same principle, but applied in this context of immune system. Right, so for the immune system, it can be broadly classified or separated into 2 parts: the innate immune system, also known as non-specific immune system, would provide the early responses to any infections or presence of pathogens. And also the adaptive immune system, also known as specific immune system, which comes a bit later because the adaptive immune system requires activation of cells, which takes a bit of time. Okay. And for the adaptive immune system, there are 2 arms. Right? Firstly, the humoral immune response, which involves antibodies. Right? This should be a term that you are familiar with. And there's also the cell-mediated immune response, which involves the cytotoxic T cells killing infected or abnormal cells. Okay, but for today's SRS, where we will focus more on the innate immune system, which will come in my next video. Okay. Alright, so let's talk a bit about the cells involved in the immune system, right? So there are many different cell types involved, many different types of immune cells, but collectively they are called white blood cells or leukocytes. Okay, So I don't know what, maybe in the past, right, where you learned white blood cells as just one term. Maybe you thought that it refers to just one cell type, like red blood cells is one cell type, so white blood cell is another cell type. But after today, I hope you learned that white blood cells is not really one cell type. It is a collective term of many different types of cells, and they are all involved in the defense of the body. All right. So as immune cells, obviously they would move around the body to detect the presence of any pathogens, and they move around the body via the blood circulatory system, which you should be familiar with from secondary school, and also the lymphatic system, which is another circulatory system in the body. Okay, so just a bit of info about the lymphatic system. Okay, if you recall your blood circulatory system, right, it involves blood, right, and blood is made up of many different cells, as well as this solution or liquid called plasma. So what happens is in many parts of the body, right, the plasma is actually forced out of the capillaries, and the plasma would then kind of surround our tissues, right, our cells, as extracellular fluid. That's where much of the exchange, whether it's exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide, or nutrients, waste products, that's where most of the exchange would occur, when the plasma is surrounding our own tissues and cells. Okay, so after that, right, most of the plasma would go back into the blood circulatory system, but some of the plasma would be drained via the lymphatic system. So another system of tubes for the plasma to go to. Okay, so that's why in the lymphatic system, right, what is circulating is not exactly blood, but is mostly plasma, as well as cells, and most of the cells are actually the immune cells. Okay, so collectively, right, this plasma with immune cells and whatever other substances are dissolved in the plasma, these are all called lymph, which gave rise to the name of a lymphatic system. Okay, and let's continue. Yeah. Okay, so for the immune cells, right, they would be circulating, right, the body in either of the two circulatory systems, and they would be able to leave the circulatory system to enter the body, the tissues of the body, or the organs, right, to protect the tissues and organs, to detect any presence of pathogens in the tissues. And once their function is done, right, they can go back into the circulatory system and go to another part of the body. Also, there is this mobility, right, very high mobility of the immune cells throughout the body, in and out of the circulatory systems, in and out of body tissues. All right, so here are some examples of the immune cells and how they look like. Okay, so you don't really have to like memorize how the immune cells look like. I don't think that is very fair, and I can't guarantee how A level is fair or not, but at least I won't test you on how immune cells look like. I'm not going to show you one diagram and ask you to identify the immune cell. That is just not fair. But again, no guarantee about A level though. Right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the cells here, because subsequently, when you learn about the innate and the adaptive immune systems, you will learn about the functions of all these cells. Okay, so let's move on a bit about the differentiation of immune cells. So this one again is something that you have learned before under stem cells. Right, immune cells are basically part of the cells in the blood, right? They're white blood cells. So they are derived from the blood stem cells. Okay, So again, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Okay, if you have forgotten all about stem cells and blood stem cells, then please go back to the stem cells lecture to revise lah. So just move on, right, to a couple of terms that we will refer to quite often in this topic, the antigens and epitopes. All right, so just how we mentioned, right, the immune cells must be able to recognize and distinguish, right, pathogens from our own body cells. And we mentioned that there are receptors on the immune cells to recognize structures on the pathogens. Right, so such structures which the receptors on the immune cells bind to, these structures are known as antigens. Okay, so by definition, antigens are basically things, molecules that trigger the immune system. So that's the definition of antigens, right? And obviously, they are found on pathogens. That's why I refer to them as structures on the pathogens. Okay, and the exact part of the antigens that the receptors on the immune cells bind to, right? Such exact parts are known as epitopes. Okay, so let me give you a diagram to explain, right? So imagine that this is, say, a bacterial protein or toxin protein, for example, right? So this will trigger the immune system. This is something that the immune cells here bind to, right? So this is called an antigen. But on this antigen, there are 3 different epitopes, right? So one immune cell here with the receptor binds to one epitope, right? The other immune cell here binds to another epitope with a different receptor. Okay? Okay, so again, right, the antigens would be what is found on the pathogens for the immune cells to recognize via their receptors, and the exact part of the antigen that the receptor binds to, that would be called the epitopes. Right? Okay, so that's for the overview. I know, haven't, yeah? A bit more, sorry. Okay, so for the innate immune system, right, the immune cells of the innate immune system have receptors that are not so specific. That's why the innate immune system is called non-specific immune system. Right, so the receptors on the immune cells of the innate immune system will be able to recognize the common antigens, right, found on different pathogens. Okay, so they would not be able to recognize specific pathogens. They cannot recognize a particular bacterium, for example, but they would know that it is a bacterium, right? Not the particular bacterium, but like it's a bacterium lah. But for the adaptive immune system, right, the immune cells involved are very specific. They have receptors that are able to recognize unique epitopes on unique antigens of unique pathogens. Right, so not only would the cells of the adaptive immune system be able to recognize a bacterium, they will be able to recognize which bacterium, and not just which bacterium, but probably which strain as well. Right, so they are very specific. That's why the adaptive immune system is also described as a specific, right, immune system. Okay, so that would be all for overview, yeah.